Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff if you enjoy this content, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. And as always, we have a really good show for you folks today. One longtime Penguin is the subject of growing trade rumors. Should he be in those rumors to begin with? We'll tackle that to kick off today's episode. Then Mitch Marner is officially up for grabs. Is he still somebody that should be in the crosshairs for Kyle Dubas in the Penguins organization? And finally, the Pens are bringing back one of their depth forwards. They make their first big signing. I think big is subjective, but first big signing of the offseason. All that and more on today's episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Let's get started. And before we get started with the hockey talk, quick shout out, because we're Pittsburgh based. Quick shout out to JJ Spaun, officially the 2025 US Open champion, hitting the longest putt of the entire weekend at Oakmont to close things out on 18. A lot of people are going to say that they didn't enjoy that tournament because of how rough it was for the pros. I, for one, being there Wednesday, being there Friday, and watching all the other days, absolutely loved it. And how about in a tournament where the story was the course is getting the best of these professionals? JJ Spaun just says, I'm going to win this in the most un-Oakmont way possible, and I'm going to sink it from forever away. I absolutely loved the ending, and I love that it's JJ too. We all saw what happened to him earlier in the year in that playoff against Rory. For him to get it done and get his first major win, just a huge moment, and a moment that is going to go down in history after the 125th U.S. Open.
No kidding. It was awesome being there, number one. And number two, I'm not worried about who's, in it and who's not in it. I don't care that Scotty Scheffler's not in the running down the stretch. I don't care that Rory was done at like noon today. None of that bothers me because this course, like you said, 8 professional golfers alive. That makes for entertaining golf. I was watching every stroke of that last hour, watching guys miss fairways, struggle on chip shots, struggle on the green. That is what's entertaining. First of all, I'm also just a guy who loves mass chaos. So please, more of that. And it just goes to show that Oakmont has always been this course that is reviled for its difficulty, and it is known as one of the hardest courses in the world, and it just showed it today. And yeah, shout out to JJ Spaun for just he could have 2-putt that and just went, no, I saw the line from Victor Hovland and just drained it.
Yeah, he pulled a Happy Gilmore. I think I'll just win it right now.
Yeah it unbelievable stuff. And front to back, it was fun. It was awesome to see. It was honestly supremely entertaining all over the place. Watching professional golfers struggle with the course. I mean, I don't know who doesn't enjoy that. Unless you are also a professional golfer, as someone who's a casual golfer, you have to enjoy kind of at least a little bit getting the sense of, yeah, I've been there, dude. I get it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got that over the week, but we have plenty of hockey talk to get to. But I mean, what sport is most closely associated with hockey? Golf. So of course, it's the off season. We're going to talk golf, especially whenever they're playing at Oakmont this week. And really, it was a fun tournament. But let's get into the hockey, because that's why the bulk majority of people have clicked on this video, have clicked on this podcast, and we'll do that right now. The Penguins introduced Dan Muse officially as their head coach earlier this week with his introductory press conference. Horwat, we have talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about Dan Muse, our thoughts on his resume, but now I want to get your thoughts on his first presser. Kind of now that you've heard him speak, now that you've kind of seen a little bit about what he's all about. Of course, more layers are going to be peeled back as time goes on, as we see more from him. But what were your thoughts on Muse's introductory presser earlier this week and his first opportunity to introduce himself to this fan base?
Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nothing seemed too eye-popping. Honestly, I think the biggest takeaway that I had was, oh yeah, Kyle Dubas sometimes doesn't wear glasses. Truly, it was very much just a run of the mill. This is my first press conference as an NHL head coach. It's an honor to be an NHL coach. I've reached out to most of the players already. I've especially reached out to the captain. Uh, it's, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, the Penguins organization. Thank you, this. Thank you, that. It was just a lot of uh, stuff I expected. Nothing really struck me as shocking. So I didn't have too many takeaways. It really was just, welcome to the team. Welcome to the city. We'll see where it goes from here. Obviously, he said the bullet points of here to win, here to build a good team, here to do this, here to do that. And there was that little talk of defense, and we got a little bit into the schematics of things.
Yeah.
But honestly, you could have straight up read the playbook to me. It's June. I'm not paying that much attention to the playbook right now because I know it's changing in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, especially considering the fact that he hasn't even hired assistant coaches yet. So we don't even know their background, which is going to lend itself towards the type of hockey that the Penguins are going to be playing this fall. So there's still plenty to learn about Dan Muse and his plans for the Penguins organization. But there was one answer in particular that, again, just opened the door a little bit into his personality, into his background that I liked a lot. And, credit goes to Taylor Haas of DK Pittsburgh Sports for asking the question. And honestly, it's a pretty in-your-face question saying basically, the best you could muster as a player was D3 hockey. So what about being a head coach of some professionals and some people that are, and I'm paraphrasing here, are on the Mount Rushmore of this sport? Is it going to be weird for you saying, hey, do this, do that? And he essentially said, one, I wasn't even very good in D3, so don't even give me the statute of a good D3 player because I'm not, which I think will endear himself to the fan base a little bit because if there's anything that myself and I feel like a lot of people from Pittsburgh like, it's self-deprecating humor. So, check that box for Mr. Muse. But he went on to say, listen, I've been coaching college. I've coached U.S. National Development Team program. Essentially everywhere I've coached, everybody has been at a higher level than I ever was as a player. So it's nothing new. And in that answer, it's not just what he said, but it's the message. Hey, Dan Muse is comfortable in his own skin. Dan Muse is comfortable with the route that he took to get to where he's at right now. And you're going to need to be that. You're going to need to be all in on what brought you to the dance if you're going to be successful here. So I liked what I saw from Dan Muse. And again, like you mentioned, it's June. It's an introductory presser. A lot of this stuff was copy paste. You could probably look at every introductory presser over the last half decade, and 95% of it is going to match exactly what we heard from Dan Muse earlier this week. But at the same time, I think it was something that allowed Penguins fans at least a glimpse into who is going to be behind the bench for this team this fall.
For sure, and that's the most I expected. Yeah, he endeared himself to the fan base a bit. I just wasn't expecting too much. Like I said, it was nice seeing him kind of acknowledge or at least be asked about his playing history because, first of all, that's not something I would have ever thought to have asked because that's not something that normally, I don't know, that I would care about. Like it's showing that it is a bit of a break from the mold in terms of the NHL and the boys club type aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
How a lot of like the Flyers, they have what, like 5 former players in their organization,
Mm-hmm.
or off the ice in their organization at least. And yeah, the Kings were on the boys club train for a long time. I think you get Boston was on it for a long time, and they still are. The Penguins have never really been big on that, but this is a completely new direction by way of not only is he not a former NHLer like the Penguins had in Sullivan and Bilesma, and there's got to be another one back there that I'm just forgetting, but he is a completely fresh face from the assistant coaching levels at the NHL, nothing higher than that. And not only that, he also didn't play that deep into his life. So he's always been a coach. He's always been a bench boss for hockey players, like he said, that have been to higher levels than he ever was. So I like that it's a new direction for this team to go in, and it isn't your run-of-the-mill former player who, I mean, the superstars usually don't become coaches. We saw what happened with Wayne Gretzky. But it's not a former NHLer. It's not a former AHLer. It's not even a former ECHLer. It's a guy that played AAA, apparently wasn't good at it. And he's worked his way up as a coach, and as nothing else, as a coach to the NHL level.
Yeah, you mentioned it's a boys' club, and in the NHL more so than I think in other fields. It's more of who you know than what you know, but this is a guy who has had to work for everything that he has gotten. He even said Peter Laviolette, whenever Laviolette gave him that first opportunity at the NHL level, he didn't know him. He just got it based on his resume. And I think there is something to be said for him continuing to build that resume to get to this point where now he has the reins of an NHL squad. Not only that, he has the reins of an NHL squad that is in a very interesting position. And we'll get into that more this episode and also as the summer goes on. But let's continue this conversation by talking a little bit about one of the players that, as of right now, should be one of his kind of biggest pieces, and that's Bryan Rust. Although there is some speculation starting to stir up over this past week that Bryan Rust is going to be heavily sought after this summer by multiple teams around the NHL. According to TSN insider Pierre LeBrun, quote, plenty of teams are calling on Penguins forward Bryan Rust. So there is interest, at least around the league. That's what we know. As far as if there's interest the other direction, meaning Kyle Dubas wanting to potentially ship Rust out of Pittsburgh, that we do not know, and we have to wait on the answers for that. But Bryan Rust is coming off a career year, so it's no surprise that other teams would be interested in the 33-year-old winger. Had 31 goals, 65 points in the 2024-25 season, and he has 3 years remaining on his current deal, $5.125 million. So it begs the question, Horwat, is trading Bryan Rust something that you would seriously consider if you were Kyle Dubas?
I think so. I think at this point, this is the highest his value is ever going to be. And truthfully, you just don't know what kind of team the Penguins are going to be this upcoming season. Sure, you're trying to rebuild on the fly a bit, rebuild quickly, but you have to look at it from an honest lens and say, when genuinely is the Penguins' window to contend again? Because if it is anywhere past next season, it's not going to fit for Bryan Rust. I get he has 3 years left, but I don't foresee, nothing against Bryan Rust. He's a great dude and obviously a great player. Don't foresee another 30-goal season coming from him. It took him a while to get to this one, and I mean, the injuries seem to always follow him around. He sure played some of his best hockey this past season, but this is probably his peak. Just knowing the way hockey players go, it's unlikely he hits 65 points again in his career. Some other team might believe that. Why not swing away now? Especially if, like I said, Bryan Rust can be a good player on a winning team. He might hit 65 points again on a winning team elsewhere. If the Penguins aren't doing that for him, let him go do it somewhere else and kind of sell high, because he's not going to fit the Penguins window. It's the same reason why big free agent signings for short term don't make sense for the Penguins this year.
Mm-hmm. In a vacuum, I agree with you, but the problem is the Penguins cannot be looking in a vacuum right now. So I would actually disagree with the overall point. If I was Kyle Dubas, I would say unless somebody blows me away in a trade package for Bryan Rust, he's not going anywhere. His value to the franchise, in my opinion, on and off the ice, is more than the return could potentially provide. Yes, there's a chance that you get a first-round pick back and that first-round pick turns into a great player. There's a chance that that happens. But when I look at Bryan Rust, even if he's not scoring 30 goals a season, even if he's not putting up the 65 points a season, I think his value to the franchise is more important than almost anything you can throw back, again, unless it becomes ridiculous. Because I think if you trade Bryan Rust, you end up putting yourself in danger of going too far in the other direction. Too often, we as fans of the sport, we as people who pay attention to the team and talk about the team a lot, always say you could either be in one of two camps. You're either contending or you're rebuilding. But the problem is, in those two camps, there are numerous variations on how to get to the result you're looking for. And there's various ways that you can go too far in that direction and end up hurting yourself longer term. And I think trading Bryan Rust specifically is a move that, unless you get tremendous value, is going to send you too far in the other direction. I think it's not the same with a guy like Rickard Rakell, because I don't think he provides as much off the ice as what Bryan Rust does. And I also think Bryan Rust is going to mature into his mid to late 30s better than Rickard Rakell will. But as far as the too far in the other direction thing, I look at teams like Buffalo, who just sold, and said, we will get as many young players as possible, and that's going to turn us around. They're now the team with the longest playoff drought in North American sports. Maybe a better example is the Ottawa Senators. For the past 3, 4, maybe 5 years, they have had some of the most entertaining and exciting young players in the entire league. And yet this was the first year they got back to the playoffs. It's because they went too far in that opposite direction. It's because they tore it down just a little too much. It's because they traded away that one or two players that they probably should have held on to help bring forward this new young generation and teach them what it's like to be a winner at this level. I think the Penguins need that. They'll have it in Sidney Crosby. He's not going anywhere. But all signs point to Evgeny Malkin being done after this year. So you're going to need somebody else in that locker room that not only knows how to win, but knows how to win in this organization. And I think Bryan Rust provides that. You can trade away other players. I think Bryan Rust is the player that you look at and you say, he's the one we hold on to, unless, you want to give us a top 10 pick. Sure. But I don't see other teams offering that up for Bryan Rust at the age of 33. I just don't think what somebody else is going to offer the Penguins is going to match the value that he's going to provide by staying with this organization.
I just think I see what you're saying. I just do think some team out there would be willing to give that up. I do. It's like I said, you think he's going to grow old gracefully into
better than Rickard Rakell. I'm not going to say he's going to age like Sidney Crosby. That's probably impossible. But I think that his ability to play the 200-foot game is what's going to keep him at least at a higher level and more worth it than a guy like Rickard Rakell.
Right. And I still am just thinking of teams, and you said the Buffalo Sabres, and I think that's a team that has been trying to build a winner through the youngsters, through those kids, and it's just not working for them. It's not working for them. All right, let's try bringing in a veteran. Here you go, Jason Zucker. Wait, now it's interesting because that's Bryan Rust's buddy.
Yeah.
Watch those two interact in the locker room before Zuck got traded. And I mean, Zucker is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal person, and a great locker room guy and a good veteran to have on your team. He's not a champion. Bryan Rust is a champion 2 times over. I think we've had this discussion before a little while back where I brought those two together and said Buffalo makes a lot of sense for Bryan Rust in terms of what Buffalo is selling. I don't know what they're trying to get back, but a championship piece like Bryan Rust could be good. I don't know what they could give off. But if it's the right name, and I'm with you on the Penguins need to be blown away by an offer for Bryan Rust, by the way. I will say that. I'm not sending Bryan Rust out the door for a bag of pucks. I'm saying it does need to be a worthy return because, again, yeah, Bryan Rust is probably going to decline. It's not going to be a sharp decline. He's not going to fall off the face of the earth like Chris Letang has recently. It's going to be more of a gradual. He's going to have a good year next year, no doubt. But it doesn't fit the Penguins championship window in terms of his decline plus that window opening. That's just the way I've been seeing it. The Penguins will need to be blown away by an offer to make that move. I just think teams like Buffalo can do that and would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Buffalo make some horrendous mistakes in the past and overpay and trades and such. So we'll have to see how it pays off. But I think that unless it's ridiculous, which I don't think somebody's going to overpay ridiculous right now, I just don't see the upside to trading Bryan Rust right now. I think it sends you too far in the opposite direction. But hey, we'll have to wait and see, because the noise is only going to get louder as we get closer to the NHL draft and the opening of free agency here in just about half of a month. Speaking of free agency, there is one player that apparently is going to hit free agency, a player that we've been talking about a good bit over the past couple of months, and that is Mitch Marner. According to Andy Strickland of the Cam and Strick podcast, Marner will not be returning to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Instead, let me know if you've heard this one before, Darren Ferris will take his client to the open market. And then there's another report, speculation from David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period, saying he would not be surprised if Marner walked away with a $14 million AAV on a 7-year deal. And the team that Pagnotta speculated could be in on this discussion, the Carolina Hurricanes. So Mitch Marner might be coming to the Metropolitan Division, but does he fit with this particular team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, in the Metropolitan Division?
It doesn't seem it, does it? No, the money never seemed like it was going to seem it. 14 year over year for Mitch Marner. I mean, the Hurricanes have, first of all, already. I don't know if Puckpedia has updated to the point of the new cap in there, but $28 million in cap space right now, and their goalie is locked up for another year. Both goalies are locked up through next season. Brent Burns isn't going to require a ton of money. Dmitry Orlov is probably going to free agency as well. Jack Roslovic. I think that the Hurricanes could throw $15 million at Mitch Marner and still be okay money wise. Truthfully, their team is pretty locked up through at least a couple seasons. That'll be a fascinating team to keep an eye on in terms of the Marner sweepstakes. Probably other players in the free agency market as well. And they're a team that, especially considering the playoffs they just put together, a couple of trades might be involved in there as well to help shed more cap space if need be.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to try and make some big changes, take some big swings, and none bigger than that one. I could easily see Carolina being involved in that. And weren't they not already? Weren't they one of the teams involved in the that whole? I mean, obviously the whole Mikko Rantanen fiasco, but wasn't that the connection there? They were trying to get Marner out of Toronto during the season.
Yeah, I thought, if I remember correctly, there were some discussions that were had on podcasts like 32 Thoughts that the Hurricanes were trying to get another big name star because, well, they're 0 for 2 on keeping them in Carolina over the last couple of years with Jake Gensel and then Mikko Rantanen. Carolina's just, what did we say a couple episodes ago? And I think our first episode back, is there a team that is having more of an identity crisis than the Carolina Hurricanes? Nobody is sticking there, and they can't get past the Eastern Conference Final. Not only that, they can't even compete once they get into the Eastern Conference Final. So maybe this helps them. And I know a lot of people are going to scream at the screen right now, whichever they're watching on, whether it's a phone or a laptop or a television. They're going to say, yeah, like Mitch Marner is actually going to help them in the playoffs. Well, if you look at his last 4 years in the playoffs, he's a point per game player. I mean, maybe not in the biggest moments, but he's scoring. He's putting up points. And at the end of the day, what is Carolina's biggest issue? Scoring in the playoffs. But this is not a Carolina Hurricanes podcast. This is a Penguins podcast. So as far as whether or not he fits with the Penguins, I don't think at this current stage that they're at, I don't think that he fits at all. Really. No. I mean, there are times when you have a plan that there are players that shake loose that you can make an exception for. I just don't think taking that big of a swing this early into a rebuild is going to pan out for the Penguins. Because you look at what happened a couple of years ago. I understand they weren't looking to rebuild 2 off seasons ago, but they took a big swing in getting Erik Karlsson. They took a big swing, whether you believe it or not, on Ryan Graves. He was the top defenseman on the free agent market. They took a big swing, signed him to a 6-year deal. Not only did it not work out, it has actively pushed them back in their rebuild. I think that's something you have to keep an eye on with Mitch Marner. He's 28 already. He won't be 29 and they're competing. I think it's probably 30 to 31 years old with Mitch Marner before you're truly competing for something again. And I just don't think that with the need to completely overhaul your defense, to potentially completely overhaul your goaltending, that bringing in Mitch Marner at the pontificated number of $14 million is going to be something that would fit with the Penguins. Now, would it be fun? Yes.
Of course.
It would be a heck of a lot of fun to watch Sidney Crosby and Mitch Marner on the same team. But I don't know if it fits where the Penguins are at as they're currently constructed.
I don't think so either. Not at this current construction. The issue is I don't see Marner's decline coming kind of the same way that I was just talking about Bryan Rust's. And what makes Pittsburgh an interesting option for Marner here, you just got to kind of play ball with me here, is that the Penguins window could easily reopen in the next 7 years.
Well, in the next 7. Yeah,
exactly. And I'll leave it at that. Give Marner the idea of, hey, listen, the first 2 of this 7-year, 14, fine. Let's just say 14 for the sake of conversation. For $14 million year over year for 7 years. Hey, we might not be good for the first 2. Let me tell you about those last 5, though. Where you're making a ton of money. Maybe Sidney Crosby's signing another small deal to stick around at the age of 40. Still playing with your buddy Sid. Who knows who's on the team by then in terms of prospects coming up, other trades that may have happened. Mitch, listen, you may not have been the biggest name in Toronto. You may have been quite disliked in Toronto. You won't be disliked in Pittsburgh, that's for certain. And you won't be the biggest name in Pittsburgh. And the tensions and I don't want to call it the pressure, because when you say the pressure trademark, Toronto will lose its mind.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of intensity isn't here in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a great sports town. It is an intense sports town. There is a lot of pressure to succeed here, sure. Boy, there's something about Toronto, though, and something with that whole conversation of Mitch Marner as a playoff player. Listen, man, you said the stats, sure, that might be a lot of games 1, 2, and 3. Who knows what a different scenario, a different home ice, what a different fan base does for a player like Mitch Marner. Mm-hmm. Truly, who knows? You don't know. The thing with Toronto is they're stuck in the mud because they refuse to change. Mitch Marner was going to be that change in terms of they were going to send him out. They decided to fire Kyle Dubas instead. And guess what? Mitch Marner's going to end up being the only change. They're going to re-sign John Tavares. Have fun with that one. I keep seeing Toronto people discuss that it's the combination of players that's not working. It's not necessarily the skill level. It's the combo. They're keeping the combo mostly the same. You could tell Marner, this is going to be a new combo for you here. It's going to take some time to grow into, but you'll be a centerpiece of it. He'll be the Phil Kessel of this, essentially.
Ooh.
There you go. There's the long-winded way of saying Mitch Marner could be the Phil Kessel of this whole situation. Sidney Crosby might still be around. We'll see. Evgeny Malkin, definitely gone. But maybe there's a new piece to kind of be the 2C, because Marner's not a center, so we got to work with a wing here. God only knows what's going on with the Penguins defense in the next 365 days. Let's not worry about that. Mm-hmm. For the sake of the forward conversation, going forward, ironically, absolutely Mitch Marner could be looked at as that Phil Kessel situation. He's not the first piece, he's not the second, but you know what? He is a darn good point scorer, fast, he's got some speed, and guess what Mitch Marner can do that Phil Kessel couldn't, or at least they used him to do that in Toronto? Kill penalties. Let me sell you on this one.
I was about to say, you might have a future as a used car salesman. You might have just unlocked that career path for yourself. And that's your reel right there. If somebody down at the Honda dealership on McKnight Road is like, hey, what can you do to show me your sales acumen? It's not sell me this pen. Yep. It's watch me try to sell Mitch Marner on coming to the sinking ship that has been the Pittsburgh Penguins over the past couple of years. And hey, listen, I can add on to your pitch. I was about to say, I can add to your pitch too. Imagine, Mitch, if you're the guy that helps Sid get his 4th cup right before he retires. Imagine you are the guy that he's hugging as he's getting ready to just walk off into the sunset with cup number 4. That could be you that turned it all around in Pittsburgh. Now, whether or not that's actually feasible is neither here nor there. But if you can make him believe it, maybe he comes down on that 14 a little bit. Maybe he says, you know what? I'm feeling the spirit of Sidney Crosby coursing through my veins. Let me take a pay cut to go to the Penguins. At the end of the day, I think it would have to be a tremendous sale job, and that number would have to, capital letters, underscore, have to come down for it to make any sense for the Penguins. I think at the end of the day, very much so out of the realm of possibility, but it's interesting to speculate and to think of because it's June 15th and we still have a couple weeks before we even get to the draft. But you had one more layer. I'll let you go right now.
It's another fun, quick layer. You got to remember where Phil Kessel came from before arriving in Pittsburgh. It was the Toronto Maple Leafs, ladies and gentlemen.
Listen, the story writes itself.
The move of destiny.
Yes. What, 10 years later? Kessel came over.
And it would be a decade.
It would be a decade. It's all coming up Millhouse. It's all coming up Millhouse for Penguins and Mitch Marner. No, I think we can both agree that in 2 weeks, we're probably talking about Mitch Marner signing somewhere else. But
2 weeks, we're talking about Mitch Marner. Yeah, in 2 weeks, we're talking about Mitch Marner, the LA King. It's okay.
Yeah, that honestly makes a lot of sense. But let's close out this episode with a discussion about a player the Penguins actually re-signed. They're starting their kind of rebuild of what the structure of this team is going to be for next year. And I think there's plenty more to come over the next couple of weeks. But they officially announced the re-signing of Boko Imama to a 1-year deal worth $775,000 at the NHL level. Last season, Imama played 16 games with the NHL Penguins, but he missed the end of the season after having bicep surgery in late March. The timetable for a return from that is about 4 to 6 months. So the beginning of the season is a little bit in question because it's at the very tail end of this return timeline, but you'd have to imagine after the first couple of weeks of the season, he'll be good to go. So Boko Imama comes back to the Penguins organization for a second year. Your thoughts on his return?
I love it. I have no more thoughts other than I love it. It's a good deal, good short deal for this type of player that the Penguins just don't have. Anywhere else in the organization. Sure, he's going to miss the beginning of the year. I'm not worried about that. He didn't play at the beginning of the year last year, and he turned into okay, fine. Outside of not scoring, who's worried about that though? It's Boko Imama. Hey, one goal. You're right.
1 goal in 16 games.
But outside of that, I mean, this isn't a player you're worried about the offensive output. You see Freight Train and go, yes, you know what you're getting with him. It's not like you're paying a ton of money for him. It's a 1-year deal. It's just to keep that sort of element in the lineup, like I said, that the Penguins just don't have anywhere else. And they're a rarity these days around the league. Really, the league is still kind of in that transition phase out of these guys being a dime a dozen. Not even the Tom Wilsons of the world, but Ryan Reeves is nearing 40. Boko Imama here is 28. So you're finding a younger one that can still bring that sort of edge. And again, this isn't a deal where you were worried about the offense. It's just a good piece to have in the lineup. He's going to bring the same exact thing he brought last year, and everyone loved it. So win-win situation.
Yeah, not only did the fans love it, but the locker room really liked this guy. So I don't have any issue with this at all. And you mentioned kind of the other guys of that similar kind of play style around the league. I think he's a better player than Matt Rempe. Like pound for pound, situation to situation, zone to zone, he's a better player than Matt Rempe. Now, Rempe got all that attention simply because of, coming up and trying to take over that role. But Boko's a better hockey player, in my opinion. But not only that, he's a good veteran that can start on the AHL and kind of help along some of these young kids. And speaking of kids, he can protect the kids. At the NHL level, Philip Hollander is probably going to get a shot. Ville Koivunen is probably going to get a longer shot this year than he did last year. Same with Rutger McGroarty. We all saw how Rutger McGroarty's first professional fight turned out. You need somebody to potentially protect these kids if other professionals try to take exception to them coming up to take their jobs or coming up to embarrass them from other teams. That is the role for Boko Imama. And I think that having somebody at least in your organization like that does have value. So I'm fine with them bringing him back, especially it is a low risk deal, as low of a risk deal as you could get. 1 year, $775K. It's a great deal for the Penguins. It's an easy one. And honestly, I would go short of saying it's the free space on the bingo card, but I think a lot of people, whenever the season ended, looked at Boko Imama and said, yeah, it would make a lot of sense if they brought him back. And here we are announcing the fact and discussing the fact that he is back on the Penguins for his second year.
Yeah, win-win situation. I got no more to it.
Now, things are about to pick up. I mentioned it at the beginning of this segment, but the Cup final is almost over. Going back to a Game 6 in Florida. It's going to be tough for Edmonton to make me look right. But you know what? Last year, they were backs against the wall down 3-0, and they brought it back to Game 7. They're just down 3-2, and I've seen a lot of people bar down Sportsnet saying, hey, listen, Sidney Crosby and the Penguins in 2009, they got blown out in Game 5 against Detroit. And what did they do? Well, they went out and they won Game 6, they won Game 7, and Sidney Crosby raised the Stanley Cup. So a lot of people still trying to draw comparisons between Sid the Kid and Connor McDavid. But the Cup final is almost over, which means things are about to pick up. The draft is in 11 days from when this episode comes out. So again, we're getting into that time of year where rosters are going to start to change quickly. And obviously, if anything happens, make sure your first stop is the tip of the iceberg, because we will have all the reactions, all the analysis, everything for you right here on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. So make sure that you like, share, subscribe, turn on the notification bell to know when we post these videos. Or if you prefer an audio version, if you're driving to work responsibly and saying, you know what, I want to put it on the audio side, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast. Nice, easy, to the point. Make sure that you follow us, because we have all of the Pens talk. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.